dexterously, making him carry one gun for me, and I two for myself, and away we marched to the place where these creatures had been, for I had a mind now to get some further intelligence of them. When I came to the place, my very blood ran chill in my veins, and my heart sunk within me at the horror of the spectacle. Indeed, it was a dreadful sight, at least it was so to me, though Friday made nothing of it. The place was covered with human bones, the ground dyed with their blood, and great pieces of flesh left here and there, half eaten, mangled, and scorched, and in short, all the tokens of the triumphant feast they had been making there after a victory over their enemies. I saw 3 skulls, 5 hands, and the bones of 3 or 4 legs and feet, and abundance of other parts of the bodies. And Friday, by his signs, made me understand that they brought over 4 prisoners to feast upon, that 3 of them were eaten up, and that he, pointing to himself, was the 4th, that there had been a great battle between them and their next king, of whose subjects, it seems, he had been one, and that they had taken a great number of prisoners, all which were carried to several places by those who had taken them in the fight, in order to feast upon them, as was done here by these wretches upon those they brought hither. I caused Friday to gather all the skulls, bones, flesh, and whatever remained, and lay them together in a heap, and make a great fire upon it, and burn them all to ashes. I found Friday had still a hankering stomach after some of the flesh, and was still a cannibal in his nature, but I showed so much abhorrence at the very thoughts of it, and at the least appearance of it, that he durst not discover it, for I had, by some means, let him know that I would kill him if he offered it. When he had done this, we came back to our castle, and there I fell to work for my man Friday, and first of all, I gave him a pair of linen drawers, which I had out of the poor gunner's chest I mentioned, which I found in the wreck, and which, with a little alteration, fitted him very well. And then I made him a jerkin of goat's skin, as well as my skill would allow, for I was now grown a tolerably good tailor. And I gave him a cap which I made of hare skin, very convenient and fashionable enough, and thus he was clothed, for the present, tolerably well, and was mighty well pleased to see himself almost as well clothed as his master. It is true he went awkwardly in these clothes at first. Wearing the drawers was very awkward to him, and the sleeves of the waistcoat galled his shoulders and the inside of his arms, but a little easing them where he complained they hurt him, and using himself to them, he took to them at length very well. The next day, after I came home to my hutch with him, I began to consider where I should lodge him, and that I might do well for him and yet be perfectly easy myself. I made a little tent for him in the vacant place between my 2 fortifications, in the inside of the last and in the outside of the first. As there was a door or entrance there into my cave, I made a formal frame door case, and a door to it, of boards, and set it up in the passage, a little within the entrance, and, causing the door to open in the inside, I barred it up in the night, taking in my ladder too, so that Friday could no way come at me in the inside of my innermost wall, without making so much noise in getting over it that it must needs awaken me. For my first wall had now a complete roof over it of long poles, covering all my tent and leaning up to the side of the hill, which was again laid across with smaller sticks instead of laths, and then thatched over a great thickness with rice straw, which was strong like reeds. And at the hole or place which was left to go in or out by the ladder, I had placed a kind of trap door, which, if it had been attempted on the outside, would not have been opened at all, but would have fallen down and made a great noise. As to weapons, I took them all into my side every night, but I needed none of all this precaution, for never man had a more faithful, loving, sincere servant than Friday was to me, without passions, soulness, or designs, perfectly obliged and engaged. His very affections were tied to me, like those of a child to a father, and I dare say he would have sacrificed his life to save mine upon any occasion whatsoever. The many testimonies he gave me of this put it out of doubt, and soon convinced me that I needed to use no precautions for my safety on his account. This frequently gave me occasion to observe, and that with wonder, that however it had pleased God in his providence, and in the government of the works of his hands, to take from so great a part of the world of his creatures the best uses to which their faculties and their powers of their souls are adapted. Yet that he has bestowed upon them the same powers, the same reason, the same affections, the same sentiments of kindness and obligation, the same passions and resentments of wrongs, the same sense of gratitude, sincerity, fidelity, and all the capacities of doing good and receiving good that he has given to us. And that when he pleases to offer them occasions of exerting these, they are ready, nay, more ready, to apply them to the right uses for which they were bestowed than we are. This made me very melancholy sometimes, in reflecting, as the several occasions presented, how mean a use we make of all these, even though we have these powers enlightened by the great lamp of instruction, the Spirit of God, and by the knowledge of his word added to our understanding. And why it has pleased God to hide the like saving knowledge for so many millions of souls who, if I might judge by this poor savage, would make a much better use of it than we did. From hence I sometimes was led too far to invade the sovereignty of Providence, and, as it were, arraign the justice of so arbitrary a disposition of things that should hide that sight from some and reveal it to others, and yet expect a like duty from both. But I shut it up and checked my thoughts with this conclusion. First, that we did not know by what light and law these should be condemned, but that as God was necessarily, and by the nature of his being, infinitely holy and just, so it could not be, but if these creatures were all sentenced to absence from himself, it was on account of sinning against the light which, as the Scripture says, was a law to themselves, and by such rules as their conscience would acknowledge to be just, though the foundation was not discovered to us. And secondly, that still as we all are clay in the hands of the potter, no vessel could say to him, "Why hast thou formed me thus?" But to return to my new compassion, I was greatly delighted with him, and made it my business to teach him everything that was proper to make him useful, handy, and helpful, but especially to make him speak and understand me when I spoke. And he was the aptest scholar that ever was, and particularly was so merry, so constantly diligent, and so pleased when he could but understand me, or make me understand him, that it was very pleasant for me to talk to him. Now my life began to be so easy that I began to say to myself that could I but have been safe from more savages, I cared not if I was never to remove from this place where I lived.